What happens when the foundation of human history cracks beneath your feet? Deep in the subterranean chambers of Istanbul's Archaeological Museum, a team of researchers has uncovered something that shouldn't exist, a flawlessly crafted metallic object embedded in stone layers that predate civilization itself. Impossible, unexplainable, and potentially world-changing. As director Kemal Arslan and his team struggle to comprehend their discovery, dark forces mobilize around them. Someone doesn't want this artifact studied. Someone doesn't want the truth revealed. The mathematical precision of its spiraling patterns points to astronomical knowledge that hunter-gatherers shouldn't possess, knowledge that has been deliberately buried repeatedly by every major civilization that has ruled this ancient crossroads. What secret could be so dangerous that empires across millennia would conspire to keep it hidden? And why is a powerful collector willing to kill to possess it? The air split with a deafening crack that silenced every voice in the Istanbul Archaeological Museum. For 3 heartbeats, time suspended itself. Dust particles frozen in shafts of light, workers caught mid-motion like ancient statues. Then came the rumble. Deep, primal, rising from beneath the floorboards, vibrating through the soles of their feet. The renovations had disturbed something that had remained undisturbed for millennia. Director Kemal Arslan felt it first, not just the physical tremor, but a sudden, inexplicable weight pressing against his chest. 23 years of archaeological fieldwork had taught him to recognize the particular silence that follows significant discovery. This silence was different, heavier, wrong. "Everyone back," he commanded, his voice steady despite the cold sweat forming at his temples. The construction crew froze, tools still gripped in white-knuckled hands. One man, Ibrahim the youngest, stood transfixed at the edge of where the museum floor had collapsed, revealing darkness below. "I said back," Kemal's voice echoed against marble and glass display cases housing Ottoman treasures. The security guard reached for his radio, but Kemal shook his head. "Not yet." The hole measured approximately 2 meters across, its edges ragged where contemporary concrete had sheared away from something much older. Ancient stonework peeked through the gap, illuminated by work lights that cast harsh shadows across unfamiliar symbols carved into weathered surfaces. "Dr. Arslan," Ibrahim whispered, pointing, "there are steps." Indeed, barely visible beneath the dust and debris, crude stone steps descended into darkness. Not crude, Kemal corrected himself as he knelt cautiously at the edge. Purposeful, deliberate. The craftsmanship was unmistakable even to an untrained eye. These were no Roman foundations, as the museum blueprints had indicated. The cutting technique suggested something far older. "Bring more lights," he instructed, struggling to keep his voice professional, "and get Dr. Nadia on the phone immediately." The beam of his flashlight caught something below, a glint of reflected light, where there should be only earth and stone. The museum's floor plan indicated nothing beneath this section, except solid foundation dating to the Byzantine period. Every instinct told him to seal the opening, to document, to follow protocol. 20 years ago he would have. But age had brought both wisdom and a dangerous curiosity. "Sir, regulations state," began the security supervisor. "I know the regulations," Kemal interrupted, never taking his eyes from the darkness below. "This is my responsibility." Nadia Özkan arrived 14 minutes later, breathless, her normally immaculate appearance disheveled from rushing across the city. As the museum's lead preservationist, nothing moved through the building without her approval. The flash of anger in her eyes died when she saw the opening. "How deep?" she asked simply, setting down her bag and accepting a hard hat. "Unknown." The steps descend at least 4 meters before turning. Temperature reading suggests a significant chamber. Kemal didn't mention the growing unease that had settled in his stomach. No markings consistent with Byzantine or Ottoman construction. Workers secured the perimeter with temporary scaffolding, while Nadia examined soil samples from the edge. Her frown deepened. "This layer," she said, holding up a plastic bag containing dark earth, "contains ash consistent with a significant burning event, but it's beneath undisturbed Byzantine foundations." "Impossible," Kemal muttered. "That would place it before—" "Exactly," Her voice dropped lower. "We need to document everything before word spreads." The descent took 17 minutes. Each step groaned beneath their weight, ancient stone protesting after millennia of silence. The air grew increasingly stale, carrying the unmistakable scent of sealed spaces, mineralized dust and absence. Their breathing echoed in the narrow passage, punctuated by the soft scrape of their shoes against stone worn smooth by long-dead feet. The chamber revealed itself gradually as their lights swept across its dimensions. Roughly circular, perhaps 8 meters in diameter, with walls constructed of fitted stone blocks that defied historical categorization. But it was the symbols that caused Nadia to gasp. Intricate spirals and geometric patterns etched with precision into every surface, reminiscent of markings found at Göbekli Tepe, but more refined, more intentional. "This shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not under Istanbul. Not at this depth." In the center of the chamber stood a stone container, rectangular and unadorned, except for a series of symbols that appeared to have been burned rather than carved into its surface. The lid bore scorch marks in perfect geometric patterns, impossible precision for the time period suggested by the construction techniques. "No one touches anything," Kemal ordered, though the words felt inadequate against the weight of their discovery. He photographed methodically, moving around the perimeter while Nadia sampled the air and documented the symbols. "These patterns," she said, pointing her light at a particular sequence, "they match fragments we found last year at the Eastern excavation, the ones we couldn't date conclusively." The decision to open the container violated every protocol, every professional standard Kemal had enforced throughout his career. Yet he gave the order with calm certainty, as if someone else were speaking through him. 4 workers positioned themselves around the stone box, while cameras recorded from every angle. "On my count," he said, ignoring the tremble in his hand. 1, 2, 3. The lid slid away with surprising ease, releasing air that had been sealed for thousands of years. Inside, nestled in material that disintegrated upon exposure to the modern atmosphere, lay an object that caused every person present to step back involuntarily. Perfectly preserved, a metallic artifact gleamed under their lights, its surface unmarred by corrosion or age, polished to a mirror finish that reflected their shocked expressions. Its form resembled nothing in the archaeological record, not quite a tool, not quite a weapon, with inlaid spiral patterns matching those on the chamber walls. The craftsmanship would have been remarkable in the modern era. In a chamber that predated written history, it was impossible. The young archaeologist Emre, who had been documenting the symbols, dropped his camera. The sharp crack of breaking equipment echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. "Sir," he said, his voice breaking, "the dating, if these construction techniques are consistent with what we found at the southeastern sites, this would be over 12,000 years old," Nadia finished, her academic composure crumbling. "Before established metallurgy, before cities, before civilization as we understand it." The metal object caught the light, sending reflections dancing across ancient walls like living things. For a moment, Kemal could have sworn the spirals moved, rearranging themselves beneath the surface. A collective chill passed through the group as the first person voiced what they were all thinking. This shouldn't exist. The conservation room of the Istanbul Archaeological Museum felt claustrophobic, despite its generous proportions. Harsh fluorescent lighting stripped away shadows, creating an unforgiving clinical atmosphere where the metallic object sat centered on a stainless steel examination table. 5 specialists stood at a careful distance, as if by unspoken agreement. None wanted to be the first to touch it again after its initial handling during extraction. Dr. Nadia Özkan's instruments behaved erratically in proximity to the artifact. The digital thermometer fluctuated between readings, and compasses placed nearby exhibited subtle but unmistakable deviations, the needles trembling slightly, drawn fractionally away from true north. She documented each anomaly with meticulous precision, her scientific training battling against a growing sense of professional dread. "The metallurgical composition defies preliminary analysis," she reported, her voice steadier than her hands. The surface exhibits properties consistent with an aluminum-titanium alloy, but with trace elements I can't identify without proper equipment. Museum director Kemal Arslan nodded, his reflection distorted in the object's polished surface. Outside, Istanbul continued its eternal bustle. Car horns from Gülhane Park, the call to prayer from nearby minarets, tourists photographing the Blue Mosque. All of it suddenly seemed to belong to another world entirely, separated from them by more than just the museum's thick walls. "No one beyond this room knows what we've found," Kemal stated, scanning each face for reaction. Not the ministry, not the university, not even the rest of the museum staff. Until we understand what we're dealing with, this remains classified as routine foundation maintenance. The youngest researcher, Emre, shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, protocols require notification of—" "I'm well aware of protocols," Kemal interrupted, the edge in his voice causing the others to glance up. "I've authorized emergency security measures. The excavation site is temporarily sealed as a structural precaution." Elif Kara, the museum's historical records specialist, entered carrying an armful of aged documents. Her usual calm efficiency had been replaced by barely contained excitement. "You need to see this," she said, spreading Ottoman-era maps across an adjacent table. "I found references in the Imperial Archives to underground chambers beneath this exact location. The Ottoman surveyors marked it as previously sealed by Byzantine authority, but there's more." She pointed to faded notations in the margin. "These symbols match the patterns on your artifact." The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly as the implications settled over them. Not a random find, but something deliberately hidden, repeatedly, across centuries. Dr. Nathan Cole, a visiting American specialist in pre-agricultural societies, examined the photographs of the chamber with growing agitation. His reputation for controversial theories about advanced prehistoric cultures had made him an academic outsider, brilliant but overlooked. Now his hands trembled slightly as he arranged the images in sequence. "These markings," he said, indicating the spiral patterns, "bear striking similarity to engravings found on specific pillars at Göbekli Tepe, not the commonly documented animal reliefs, but obscure geometric patterns on the interior faces of pillars 14 and 17. Kemal's eyebrows rose. "You're suggesting a direct connection?" "I'm suggesting something that would overturn established archaeological consensus," Cole replied, his voice dropping. "If this object is contemporary with Göbekli Tepe, we're looking at evidence of metallurgical knowledge that predates our earliest confirmed examples by over 7,000 years. Silence claimed the room. The magnitude of what lay before them, not just an artifact but potentially the collapse of established historical chronology, weighed on each person differently. Careers, reputations, entire academic disciplines hung in the balance. "We need absolute discretion while we verify," Kemal finally said. "Elif, continue searching the archives. Nathan, I want everything you have on those Göbekli Tepe symbols. Nadia, secure this object in the high-security vault tonight." "No tests without my direct authorization." As they dispersed, Elif lingered behind, waiting until the others had gone. "There's something else," she told Kemal, her voice barely above a whisper. "The Ottoman records mention that the Byzantine sealing wasn't the first. They found evidence that Romans had sealed it before them, and someone else before the Romans." "What are you suggesting?" "That whatever this is," she gestured toward the gleaming object, "multiple civilizations decided it should remain buried." Elif and Cole descended into the museum's restricted sub-level, where generations of architectural evolution layered upon one another like geological strata. Their flashlights cast elongated shadows across Byzantine arches that gave way to repurposed Roman columns. The foundations formed a chronological labyrinth, each stone telling its own story of conquest, adaptation, and burial. "The Ottomans built directly atop Byzantine structures," Elif explained, her voice hushed by the weight of history surrounding them. "Who built atop Roman foundations, who built atop earlier settlements. Istanbul is a vertical timeline." Cole ran his fingers along a wall where different construction methods visibly collided. Precise Roman stonework, meeting cruder Byzantine repairs. Cities upon cities, secrets upon secrets. Their footsteps echoed through corridors unused for decades. Museum staff rarely ventured this deep into the building's skeleton, where plumbing and electrical renovations had been abandoned due to structural concerns. The air grew noticeably cooler as they proceeded. "Here," Elif said, stopping abruptly. Her light illuminated a section of wall where newer masonry had been used to seal an older archway. Ottoman records mentioned a passage beneath the eastern gallery. This matches the location. Upon closer inspection, faint markings emerged on several stones, nearly invisible until viewed at the correct angle. Geometric patterns weathered by centuries, but unmistakably similar to those on the artifact. These symbols were carved into Roman stones, Cole observed, photographing each marking methodically. But the style predates Roman occupation by millennia. They were reusing decorated stones from something much older. Elif consulted the partial map she'd reconstructed from archive fragments. The Ottoman surveyors recorded a network of tunnels, but their documentation stops abruptly, as if they abandoned exploration deliberately. Working systematically, they documented each symbol, creating a composite pattern that gradually revealed its purpose. Not decorative engravings, but a complex astronomical chart. Positions of stars and constellations in configurations that made Cole pause. "This isn't contemporary astronomy," he said, rechecking his calculations. "These stellar positions correspond to the night sky as it would have appeared approximately 12,000 years ago." The implications made his hands tremble. Who could have been mapping celestial bodies with this precision during the last ice age? Elif stood motionless, the reality of their discovery settling like a physical weight. Everything she'd been taught about human history, the neat progression from primitive to advanced, the comforting timeline of technological development, threatened to unravel. "We need to tell Kemal," she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. The responsibility of knowledge felt suddenly dangerous. Their return journey through the subterranean maze passed intense silence, each lost in private calculations of professional risk and historical implications. The dim emergency lighting cast their faces in harsh contrast, every line and shadow accentuated, making them appear as strangers to one another. Upon reaching the main level, they found the conservation lab door ajar, immediately wrong. Kemal's strict security protocols required triple authentication for entry. Inside, chaos greeted them. Documentation folders lay scattered across the floor, computer monitors displayed security system override warnings, and equipment had been roughly pushed aside. The artifact remained untouched on its examination table, gleaming coldly under the fluorescent lights. "Someone has accessed our files," Elif whispered, examining the disturbed materials. Photographs of the chamber had been examined and hastily replaced. Notes on the preliminary analysis were missing entirely. Cole checked the door's electronic lock. No forced entry. Someone used authorized credentials. The violation transcended mere physical intrusion. It was an infiltration of their research, their discovery, their momentary claim to historical revelation. Someone else now shared their knowledge without sharing their caution. "The museum has been compromised," Elif said, gathering the scattered documentation. "This isn't random theft. Someone specifically targeted our discovery." Through the windows, Istanbul continued its evening routine. Ferry lights crossing the Bosphorus, cars navigating ancient streets, tourists photographing illuminated minarets. The ordinary world seemed suddenly like elaborate camouflage, hiding older truths beneath its contemporary veneer. "We're not just archaeologists anymore," Cole said, securing the door behind them. "We're either guardians or targets now." The harsh wind of southeastern Turkey cut across the plateau of Göbekli Tepe, carrying dust that had witnessed the birth of civilization. Elif pulled her jacket tighter as she surveyed the archaeological site. Massive T-shaped pillars arranged in circles, their weathered surfaces carved with animals and symbols, dating back to an era when humans were supposedly mere hunter-gatherers. 12,000 years, she whispered, her breath visible in the morning chill. Contemporary with our artifact. Cole moved methodically between the pillars, comparing photographs from the Istanbul chamber with the stone monoliths. The emptiness of the site, temporarily closed to tourists for routine maintenance, amplified every footstep against ancient limestone. "Look here," he called, kneeling beside Pillar 17. "These aren't random decorative elements." His finger traced a series of small spiral markings near the base, partially obscured by erosion, but unmistakably similar to the patterns on their artifact. "They've been overlooked because they're not representative carvings like the animals. They're mathematical." Elif examined the markings, her professional skepticism battling against mounting evidence. The original excavation reports mentioned these as possible decorative elements, but never connected them to astronomical observations. Because conventional archaeology couldn't accept that hunter-gatherers possessed this level of mathematical understanding, Cole replied, his voice tightening. It didn't fit the narrative of linear progress. The site felt different from the sanitized tourist attraction it had become, more imposing, more deliberate in its construction. Without crowds, the true scale of human achievement it represented pressed down on them with physical weight. Previous researchers missed something crucial, Cole continued, unfolding his laptop to display scanned notes from earlier excavations. These smaller markings form a pattern across multiple pillars. When mapped correctly, they create a network, similar to the symbols in the chamber beneath Istanbul. Elif's pulse quickened. A map? More like coordinates, points of reference across ancient Anatolia. Cole overlaid the symbols onto a topographical map. When aligned with the current geography, they create lines that intersect precisely at Istanbul, Elif finished, the implication stealing her breath. But that's impossible. 12,000 years ago, there was nothing at Istanbul except a strategically vital point controlling access between two seas, Cole finished. What if there was something there, something important enough to document in stone? The wind intensified, whistling between the ancient pillars like a warning. Elif studied Cole's face, his excitement barely masking a deeper anxiety. The historical implications threatened to collapse entire academic disciplines. Careers would end, textbooks would require rewriting, history itself would need reconsideration. The object isn't an anomaly, she concluded. It's evidence of a deliberate system, mathematical knowledge, metallurgical capability, and geographic awareness that shouldn't exist in that time period. Cole nodded grimly. Not according to conventional history. The methodical click of a camera shutter interrupted their conversation. They turned to see Mehmet, their Turkish colleague, photographing the pillars from various angles. Something in his careful documentation triggered Elif's instincts. His movements too precise, his focus too specific. Mehmet seems unusually interested in the same markings, she observed quietly. Cole watched the man's methodical documentation. He requested to join our expedition rather suddenly. Returning to their base camp, Elif checked her secure email on the satellite connection. 3 messages from Kemal awaited, increasingly urgent warnings. The final one, sent hours earlier, confirmed her suspicions. Security breach confirmed. Museum credentials compromised. Trust no one. That evening, Elif noticed Mehmet making a call from behind the equipment tent, speaking in hushed tones. His laptop screen reflected against the canvas, displaying not archaeological notes, but encrypted communication and a high-resolution image of their artifact. "We've been betrayed," she told Cole later, showing him Kemal's warning. "Mehmet is working for someone else. The photographs, the specific focus on the same symbols. He's documenting everything we find." "The black market for revolutionary artifacts would pay millions," Cole said, his expression hardening. "But this is beyond money." This discovery could rewrite history. Their journey back to Istanbul the next morning was conducted in tense silence. The knowledge they carried now existed in a dangerous space between scientific revolution and powerful interests. The artifact had transformed from archaeological curiosity to contested evidence, its implications extending beyond academia into realms of power and control. As their plane descended toward Istanbul, Elif gazed at the sprawling city straddling 2 continents. Beneath its modern surface and layers of Ottoman, Byzantine, and Roman history lay something older, something deliberately hidden, repeatedly buried, systematically forgotten. "History isn't just written by the victors," she murmured. "Sometimes it's deliberately erased by them." Istanbul enveloped them in its ancient paranoia. The city that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires seemed to close around Elif and Cole like a fist, its narrow streets and looming architecture suddenly oppressive. Security cameras tracked their movement through the museum corridors. Guards stationed at intervals watched with too careful indifference. Even the familiar walls felt somehow altered, as if the very stone had developed eyes. "We're being monitored," Elif whispered, noticing a guard speaking into his radio as they passed. The casual familiarity of colleagues had vanished, replaced by stiff nods and averted gazes. Information had become currency, and trust its first casualty. Kamal met them in his office, blinds drawn against the afternoon sun. The museum director's appearance had deteriorated, his normally immaculate suit rumpled, eyes ringed with exhaustion. He checked his phone obsessively before speaking. "The ministry contacted me directly," he said, voice lowered despite the privacy. "They've heard rumors of an exceptional discovery. Someone has been talking." Through the window, the Bosphorus reflected sunlight in fractured patterns. Ships moved between continents, carrying cargo and passengers just as they had for millennia. The endless movement of humanity across this geographical crossroads suddenly seemed less like progress and more like repetition, cycles of discovery and burial, revelation and suppression. "We need to see the Ottoman records again," Cole insisted. "There might be references we missed." The archives section felt different now, a labyrinth of information where threats could lurk between shelves of leather-bound records. Elif moved methodically through the catalogue system, aware of unfamiliar faces among the research staff. A new assistant archivist watched their movements with poorly disguised interest. Among the oldest manuscripts, they discovered a Byzantine text referencing an iron heart buried in the city's womb. The description matched their artifact with disturbing precision. More troubling were the marginalia notes added centuries later, warnings about the danger of unearthing what previous generations had deliberately hidden. Each empire knew, Elif realized, tracing the faded text with trembling fingers. Each buried it deeper, adding layers of protection, not to preserve it, but to conceal it. As evening approached, they retreated to a small cafe in Sultan Ahmet, sitting at a corner table with clear sightlines to all entrances. The casual precaution felt natural now, a new instinct born of growing paranoia. Cole checked his phone, then frowned. "Someone accessed my email remotely," he said, showing Elif the security notification. "They're monitoring our communications." The weight of historical conspiracy pressed against them, suffocating in its scope. Not just one cover-up, but a systematic pattern of burial and rediscovery across millennia. The artifact wasn't simply an archaeological anomaly, it was evidence of a historical narrative deliberately erased. "We need to consider what this means," Elif said, her voice steady despite her internal turmoil. "If early human societies possessed mathematical and metallurgical knowledge this advanced, then collapsed without passing it forward, it means history isn't linear," Cole finished. "Progress, collapse, rediscovery, suppression, cycles rather than continual advancement." Their conversation halted when Elif noticed a man at the adjacent table angling his phone toward them. She tapped Cole's foot under the table, a silent warning. The boundaries between innocent bystanders and surveillance had blurred entirely. That night, walking back to her apartment, Elif noticed a car following at a consistent distance. The quiet paranoia crystallized into immediate threat. She took an abrupt turn down a narrow alley, then another, her heart pounding against her ribs. The vehicle continued past the intersection, but the message was clear. They were being watched. Inside her apartment, papers had been subtly disturbed, books realigned on shelves. The invasion had been professional, nearly undetectable except to someone attuned to the precise arrangement of their possessions. Nothing taken, but everything examined. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Black market buyers interested in your discovery. $5 million for exclusive access." Then, seconds later, "Academics aren't the only ones who want to control historical narratives." The realization hit her with physical force. They had stumbled into something far beyond academic dispute. The artifact wasn't just historically significant, it was valuable, dangerous, and coveted. Whatever truth it represented, threatened not just historical consensus, but someone's power or wealth. The fundamental question transformed before her eyes. What was more dangerous, revealing a truth that would rewrite history or becoming another layer in its deliberate burial? The secure analysis room deep within the museum had been transformed into their sanctuary, a fortress of scientific methodology against growing external pressures. Carmel had disabled the security cameras, replacing digital surveillance with human guards he personally vetted. The artifact sat centered beneath specialized lighting, its metallic surface catching and reflecting each adjustment in illumination. Elif's fingers moved across her keyboard with methodical precision, plotting each spiral pattern from the object into modeling software. Cole worked silently beside her, cross-referencing the symbols with astronomical data spanning thousands of years. The concentrated silence between them was punctuated only by the scratch of pencil on paper or the soft click of keystrokes. "The spirals aren't decorative," Elif said finally, her voice hoarse from hours of disuse. "They're mathematical constants expressed through geometric progression." She rotated her screen to show Cole a rendered model. "The ratio between each curve follows the same pattern we identified at Göbekli Tepe." Cole leaned forward, fatigue momentarily forgotten. "And the pattern maps precisely to astronomical cycles, equinoxes, solstices, planetary alignments." His finger traced the curving lines. "This isn't just astronomy. It's a calendar spanning thousands of years." The artifact reflected their faces back at them, distorted across its curved surface. Two exhausted researchers grasping at a truth that seemed to recede with each new discovery. "Look at this central sequence." Elif highlighted a series of interconnected spirals. "It describes star positions, but also corresponds to geographical coordinates when properly scaled." She overlaid the pattern onto a map of the region. "These points mark locations throughout Anatolia, ancient settlements, caves, mountain peaks." "And this larger spiral," Cole added, indicating the primary curve that dominated the artifact's surface, "tracks directly across Istanbul." His voice tightened. "Not just anywhere in Istanbul. It pinpoints specific locations beneath the city, places where different architectural layers intersect. The mathematical precision of ancient knowledge stretched between them like a physical presence. Not the crude approximations expected from early humans, but calculations requiring understanding of astronomy, geography, and mathematics that wouldn't be rediscovered for millennia." "This isn't primitive knowledge," Elif whispered, the implications stealing her breath. "This is advanced scientific understanding, preserved in a form that survived when written records couldn't. A civilization capable of precise metallurgy and astronomical calculation," Cole agreed, "existing 9,000 years before we thought such knowledge possible." Their scientific breakthrough brought no triumph, only a deepening anxiety. The artifact wasn't just historically significant, it was dangerous to the foundations of human narrative. Established chronologies, the comforting linear progression from primitive to advanced, all threatened by a single metal object that shouldn't exist. The door opened abruptly, both researchers startled, reaching instinctively to protect their notes. Kamal entered, his face set in grim lines. "Someone's accessed the security systems," he reported. "I've changed all protocols, but we've been compromised again." He hesitated before adding, "And your colleague Mehmet has disappeared, along with copies of your preliminary findings." The betrayal, though expected, landed like a physical blow. Professional paranoia crystallized into immediate threat. "How much did he take?" Cole demanded. "Enough to understand what you've discovered, not enough to prove it." Kamal locked the door behind him. "But there's worse news. I've received inquiries from a private collector, someone with significant resources and political connections. They've offered to resolve the situation discreetly for the right price." A cold calculation settled over the room. Their discovery had transitioned from academic breakthrough to valuable commodity, knowledge with a price tag attached. The museum's stone walls, once comforting in their solidity, now felt like a trap closing around them. Through the small window, Istanbul's skyline sparkled against the night, minarets and skyscrapers sharing the same view that had greeted Byzantine emperors and Ottoman sultans. The city itself seemed to be watching them, waiting for their next move. "We need to move the artifact," Elif decided suddenly. "It's not safe here anymore." "Move it where?" Kamal demanded. "Every government agency, private collector, and academic rival will be watching." "Not where they'd expect," she replied, pulling up the map derived from the artifact's spirals. "We follow the coordinates it's been showing us all along." The restricted passages beneath Topkapi Palace felt impossibly ancient, older than the Ottoman structure above, older even than the Byzantine foundations beneath that. Elif led the way through narrow corridors that smelled of mineral deposits and forgotten centuries. Their flashlights cast distorted shadows across stone walls, where Ottoman repairs met Byzantine masonry, met something far more primitive. The palace archives mentioned this section was sealed during renovation in 1857, Elif whispered, her voice tight with concentration. The workers reported unsuitable chambers that were walled up rather than restored. Cole checked the coordinates against their makeshift map. "We're directly beneath the third courtyard now." His fingers traced the spiraling pattern translated from the artifact. "If the calculations are correct, we should find a junction where 3 different construction periods intersect." Their footsteps echoed against stone that had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. The weight of history pressed down with physical force, not the sanitized version taught in textbooks, but the raw, messy accumulation of human ambition, fear, and deliberate forgetting. "Here," Elif stopped abruptly, her light illuminating a section where the passage widened. The architectural transition was jarring. Precise Ottoman stonework giving way to cruder Byzantine elements, which themselves framed a doorway of entirely different construction. The entrance was small, unnervingly proportioned, with symbols etched into the lintel that matched those on their artifact. "Pre-Byzantine," Cole confirmed, photographing the markings. "Possibly pre-Roman." His hands trembled slightly as he traced the familiar spirals. "These are identical to the patterns at Göbekli Tepe." The sealed chamber beyond defied historical categorization. Circular in design, with walls constructed of fitted stone blocks that required no mortar. The precision of assembly suggested technological capabilities that shouldn't exist in the historical record. Their lights revealed walls covered entirely in geometric patterns, intricate mathematical relationships expressed through deceptively simple spirals and lines. "It's a library," Elif realized, her academic training struggling to process what she was seeing. Not of books, but of knowledge encoded in mathematics. She moved slowly around the perimeter, photographing each section. Astronomical cycles, geographic coordinates, possibly even technical specifications, all preserved in a form that could survive millennia. At the center of the chamber stood a stone platform with a depression that matched the exact dimensions of their artifact. The realization was simultaneous between them. They had found not just a hidden room, but the original resting place of the object that had started their journey. "This isn't alien technology," Cole said, his voice steadying as scientific understanding overtook initial shock. "This is human knowledge. Advanced, precise, sophisticated human knowledge that existed thousands of years before our established timeline allows. A civilization capable of sophisticated metallurgy, precise astronomical calculation, and architectural engineering," Elif agreed. "Existing during what we've categorized as pre-agricultural hunter-gatherer periods." The implications expanded between them. Not a minor historical correction, but a fundamental reconsideration of human capability and the non-linear nature of progress. Knowledge gained, lost, suppressed, rediscovered. Cycles rather than continuous advancement. Their documentation continued in focused silence, each photograph and measurement building evidence for a truth that would challenge the foundations of archaeological consensus. The chamber contained no treasures in the traditional sense. No gold, no texts, no artifacts beyond the mathematical encoding itself. Its value lay purely in information preserved through design. The quiet concentration shattered at the sound of footsteps in the passage behind them. Elif spun toward the entrance, her light catching the silhouette of a figure blocking their exit. "Remarkable preservation," said a cultured voice with the faintest German accent. Exactly as described in the documents purchased from your colleague. The collector stepped into the chamber, flanked by two men whose professional posture suggested security training. His tailored suit looked absurdly out of place against the ancient stonework, like a modern intrusion in a historical tableau. Friedrich Keller, he introduced himself with unsettling politeness. Private collector of historical anomalies. His gaze moved appreciatively around the chamber before settling on Elif. Your colleague Mehmet was quite helpful in locating this place, though his understanding of its significance was limited. The academic betrayal, though expected, landed like a physical blow. Everything they had worked to understand and protect had been commodified, knowledge with a price tag, truth as a purchasable luxury. This discovery belongs to humanity's shared heritage, Elif stated, her voice steadier than her pounding heart. Not in a private collection. Keller's smile remained pleasant, his eyes cold. History has always been owned by those with the resources to preserve it or suppress it. He gestured toward the entrance. Now, I believe you have something that belongs in this chamber. The artifact, please. The ancient chamber became a battlefield of silence. Elif clutched the padded case containing the artifact, her knuckles white against the weathered leather. The collector's security personnel flanked the only exit, their posture suggesting professional training and absolute loyalty purchased at premium rates. Your contribution to historical understanding is admirable, Friedrich Keller continued, his cultured voice echoing against mathematical engravings that had survived millennia. But history has always been curated by those with the resources to preserve it. His smile didn't reach his eyes, or to determine which versions survive. Cole positioned himself slightly ahead of Elif, a subtle protective gesture. You can't just erase this discovery. The academic documentation is surprisingly easy to discredit, Keller interrupted smoothly. Archaeological hoaxes have embarrassed institutions before. Careers have ended over less. His gaze swept the chamber with clinical appreciation. This remarkable place can be resealed, as it has been by previous generations. The artifact will join my private collection, appreciated, but controlled. The weight of choice pressed against Elif's chest, a suffocating responsibility. The artifact in her hands represented not just an object, but a fulcrum of historical truth. Her academic training had never prepared her for this moment, where knowledge itself became contested territory. What makes you think we brought it? She challenged, buying seconds to think. Because scientists like you can't resist testing a hypothesis. Keller gestured toward the central platform with its perfectly shaped depression. You needed to confirm if this was indeed its original resting place. The sudden sound of additional footsteps in the passage outside shifted the atmosphere instantly. Keller's security personnel tensed, hands moving toward concealed weapons. The collector's composed expression faltered for the first time. The confrontation erupted in chaotic seconds. Kemal appeared at the entrance with museum security, their arrival transforming the academic standoff into something more dangerous. Shouts echoed against ancient stone. One of Keller's men lunged for the case in Elif's hands. The struggle was brief, but violent. The artifact tumbled from the protective case, striking the stone floor with a resonant metallic sound that cut through the chaos. Everyone froze, watching as it rolled across uneven stone, coming to rest against the central platform, damaged, a section of its intricate spiral pattern sheared away on impact. Keller's expression transformed from confidence to fury. "You fools!" he shouted, rushing toward the broken object. "Do you understand what you've done?" In the confusion that followed, Keller's security team overpowered the museum guards. The collector knelt beside the damaged artifact, his cultivated persona cracking to reveal something darker beneath. When he stood, he held a pistol with practiced familiarity. The single shot echoed with deafening intensity in the confined space. Keller collapsed between ancient stones, his expression frozen in permanent surprise as blood spread across his expensive suit. Behind him, Mehmet lowered his own weapon, face twisted with competing emotions. "He wasn't going to let any of us leave," the Turkish archaeologist said, his voice hollow. "Once he had the artifact and confirmed the chamber's location, we became liabilities." The betrayal had circled back upon itself, the traitor ultimately betraying his new master. Ethical lines had blurred beyond recognition, leaving only the damaged artifact and its broken secrets. Morning arrived in Istanbul with manufactured normalcy. Tourists photographed the Blue Mosque against the early light. Street vendors arranged displays of spices and souvenirs. The rhythms of the ancient city continued, oblivious to how close its hidden history had come to revelation. In a secured basement of the Archaeological Museum, Elif catalogued the damaged artifact for official storage. The broken section had rendered key portions of its mathematical encoding unreadable, knowledge lost once again to human conflict. The official report would mention only an unidentified metallic object of uncertain provenance, requiring further study. Cole stood in the doorway, watching her methodical documentation. The academic paper we planned would end our careers, she finished quietly. The chamber has been resealed by order of the ministry. Restoration work on the palace foundations will cover the entrance entirely. Her hands moved across the keyboard with mechanical precision, recording the artifact's dimensions while deliberately omitting its significance. We found nothing unusual. The choice settled between them, not a victory but a weary compromise with forces larger than academic truth. The artifact would join countless other anomalies in museum storage, catalogued but unexplained, preserved but hidden. History remains incomplete, Cole observed, the weight of forced silence visible in the new lines around his eyes. Elif closed the storage container, securing the lock with a final click. History has always been incomplete. We just never knew how deliberately. The artifact disappeared into institutional darkness, joining the selective forgetting practiced by civilizations across millennia. Istanbul continued above, a palimpsest of empires built upon strategic forgetting and careful curation of acceptable truths.